Iran moved silently through the ruins of what had once been a bustling city. The wind whispered through the broken buildings, carrying dust and the faint, metallic scent of decay. He had lived here for decades, long enough to memorize every cracked wall, every collapsed street, every abandoned vehicle. Once, this world had thrived with life-green forests, flowing rivers, cities alive with laughter and sound. Now, it was silent, dead. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a dull orange glow across the barren landscape. Aaron paused for a moment, scanning the horizon with eyes honed by years of solitude. No movement, no sound, just the wind, carrying with it a memory of a world that no longer existed. He reached his shelter, a fortress-like structure half buried in the sand and rubble. It had been his home for decades. Built from scavenged metal, reinforced walls, and old human technology that still hummed faintly with power. Inside, he had everything he needed. Food reserves, water filters, energy sources, and a library of old books and records. But despite the comfort, he had grown accustomed to silence. He had grown accustomed to being alone. Iran crossed the threshold into his home, the heavy door groaning as he shut it behind him. He went straight to his workbench, running his hands over the tools and devices he had crafted over the years. Survival had become a routine, almost ritual. Every day was the same. Repair equipment, check supplies, maintain his shelter, and wander the dead city to scavenge what he could. And every day, he remembered the emptiness outside the absence of humanity. He sat by the window, looking at the lifeless horizon, lost in thought. Memories of the past haunted him occasionally. Laughter of children, the chatter of markets, the songs of birds. Those things had vanished long ago, leaving him as the sole witness to a world that had forgotten how to live. He had accepted it. He had no choice. And then came the sound. It was faint at first, almost indistinguishable from the wind. A knock. Aaron froze. He did not recognize the sound of any living being approaching. He had lived alone for so long that every noise outside was either wind, debris, or the occasional wild creature. But this was deliberate. Another knock followed, harder this time. Knock, knock, knock. Iran's hand instinctively moved to the wall, where he kept a makeshift weapon. He wasn't afraid of dying, he had survived far too much, but he was cautious. Strangers meant danger. In his decades of solitude, he had learned to expect the worst. "Who's there?" Aaron's voice was calm, steady, but carried the weight of authority. There was no reply. Only silence. Then the sound of movement. Careful and deliberate. Approaching the door, he opened a small viewport. A reinforced lens built into the door. Outside, he saw 3 figures. They were human, but not like any humans he had known. They were tall, strong, and carried themselves with a confidence that spoke of battle and survival. Each wore armor that gleamed faintly in the dim sunlight, marked with symbols he did not recognize. Weapons hung at their sides, yet they stood without hostility. Aaron's brow furrowed. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice firmer this time. The tallest of the 3 stepped forward. Her face was partially hidden by a hood, but her eyes shone with calm authority. "We're here to meet you," she said. Her voice was soft, yet it carried a weight that made Aaron straighten instinctively. "Meet me?" Aaron echoed, confusion flickering across his features. "You're trespassing on a dead world. Why would anyone want to meet me?" The woman lowered her hood slightly, revealing a face that was eerily familiar yet impossible. "Because you are the father of 3 extraordinary humans," she said simply. Aaron blinked, thinking he must have misunderstood. "Father? You're mistaken. I have no family. There is no one left. I am alone." The woman smiled faintly. "No, Aaron. You are not alone anymore. You are about to meet your children." The words struck him like a physical blow. His mind raced, refusing to believe what he heard. Father. Children. After decades of solitude, after years of thinking himself the last human alive, the universe had thrown him a revelation he was not prepared for. He took a cautious step back. I don't understand. How? The second figure, slightly shorter and more muscular, spoke this time. You were chosen, Iran. Chosen to preserve your genes and ensure the survival of humanity. We are the result of that choice. We were raised, trained, and prepared to survive. Now, we have come to meet the one who started it all. Iran's heart raced. His mind, trained for survival and logic, struggled to process the emotional weight of what he was hearing. He had imagined death, disaster, and solitude. Never had he imagined this. Never had he imagined children, warriors, survivors, humans who carried a part of him standing outside his door. He moved slowly toward the door, eyes fixed on the three figures. There was hesitation in his step, a fragile thread of fear mixed with hope. He had not known hope for decades, yet here it was, wrapped in forms that mirrored humanity itself. Come in, he said finally, his voice low but steady. If what you say is true, then you will step inside. But understand, this world is dangerous, and I will not hesitate to defend it. The tallest woman nodded. We understand, she said. We come with respect and with purpose. We are ready to learn from you, if you are ready to teach. Aaron opened the heavy door fully. The wind swept inside, carrying dust and the faint scent of metal and decay. The three huntresses stepped in, their presence commanding yet strangely comforting. Aaron closed the door behind them, the sound echoing through the empty shelter like the final note of a long-forgotten song. He studied them carefully. Each had distinct features, yet all shared something undeniably human: eyes that held intelligence, determination, and a spark of curiosity. These were not just strangers. These were his children, as impossible as that sounded. For hours, they spoke. They told him about the galaxy, about human colonies that had survived in secret, about the training they had undergone. They spoke of skills he had never imagined, of knowledge he did not possess, and yet he listened carefully, absorbing everything. Aaron realized that despite the loss and emptiness of his world, humanity had not died. It had survived, hidden and thriving in ways he could scarcely comprehend. And now, it had returned to him three strong, capable humans who bore his blood and carried his legacy. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in deep shades of red and orange. Outside, the dead world remained silent. Yet within the walls of Aaron's shelter, something stirred, a spark of life, a flicker of hope, and a reminder that humanity, no matter how far it fell, always found a way to rise. Aaron looked at the three huntresses, a mixture of awe, disbelief, and pride swelling in his chest. If what you say is true, he said finally, then we have much to do, and I will teach you everything I know. The tallest huntress smiled, a glimmer of warmth breaking through her battle-hardened exterior. And for the first time in decades, Aaron felt something he thought he had lost forever: hope. The knock at the door had changed everything. The dead world was no longer truly dead. The three huntresses sat quietly inside Aaron's shelter, their eyes scanning the room with cautious curiosity. The air was thick with dust, the remnants of a long-dead world. Shelves of old books, tools, and equipment surrounded them, but their attention was fixed entirely on the man before them. Aaron's eyes, sharp from decades of survival, studied their movements, their expressions, their very presence. Tell me everything, Aaron said finally, his voice steady but heavy with disbelief. Start from the beginning. Who are you, and how do you know me? The tallest huntress leaned forward slightly, her eyes softening. We are your children, Aaron, or at least, The closest the universe could make us. We were created using your DNA, your traits, your skills. We were born to continue what you started, to ensure humanity's survival. Aaron's brow furrowed. His mind spun in confusion. Children? Created from my DNA? I don't understand. I never had a family. I never... His voice trailed off, emotion catching him by surprise. Decades of solitude had built walls around his heart, walls that had never allowed hope to enter. And now, those walls trembled, threatened to crumble. The second huntress spoke, her voice firm yet calm. You were chosen, Aaron, because of your resilience, your intelligence, your ability to survive against impossible odds. Humanity needed more than survival. It needed someone like you to pass on traits that machines, aliens, or any other force could not replicate. The words sank deep into Aaron's mind. He had always thought his years of struggle were meaningless, that his life was simply a long, lonely wait for the inevitable end. And yet, here were living proofs that his endurance had not been in vain. Proof that humanity had not given up, that it had found ways to endure, even in the darkest corners of the galaxy. The third huntress, smaller and quicker in movement, added, We were trained in the arts of survival, combat, strategy, and intelligence. But we have more to learn from you, not only about survival, but about what it truly means to be human. You are the key to completing us. Aaron leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He thought of the years spent scavenging through ruins, of the empty nights spent listening to the wind, of the meals eaten in silence. And now, 3 extraordinary humans, his children, his legacy sat before him, ready to learn, to grow, to carry forward the essence of humanity. I never imagined this, Aaron said slowly. I thought I was the last human alive. I thought my life had ended long ago. He shook his head, disbelief etched across his features. And yet, here you are. Alive. Strong. Human. The tallest huntress reached out, her hand steady. We are here because of you, Aaron. You lived when others could not. You endured when others fell. And now, you are our father. Not just by blood, but by guidance, by teaching, by showing us what it means to be human. Aaron felt a lump in his throat. He had long stopped expecting anything from the universe, and yet, the universe had given him this: a family, a purpose, and a chance to shape the future. His hands trembled slightly as he reached forward, placing them over the huntress's hands in a silent gesture of acceptance. Then we have work to do, he said, his voice steadying. You are strong, yes, but you are still children, in many ways. You need to understand not just survival, but the heart of humanity, the creativity, the curiosity, the cleverness that no machine or alien can replicate. The huntresses nodded, listening intently. Aaron began to share his knowledge, starting with the basics: how to find food in the barren world, how to purify water, how to repair broken machines. He explained strategies he had learned through decades of trial and error, teaching them how to adapt, how to observe, and how to think like humans rather than like machines or warriors. Hours passed, and the room filled with the sound of voices, laughter, and questions. For the first time in decades, Aaron felt alive, connected, and needed. He realized that this was the essence of humanity, not merely survival, but teaching, guiding, and inspiring others to grow stronger. Yet, amid the warmth and excitement, a shadow loomed. The tallest huntress spoke carefully, her voice low and serious. Father, we must warn you. Humanity is not safe. There are forces beyond this world, intelligent, powerful, and relentless. They seek to eliminate or control humans. That is why we were trained. That is why we are here. You are not just a survivor. You are part of the key to humanity's defense. Iran frowned, sensing the weight of responsibility pressing upon him. For decades, I've lived in silence, thinking this world was the end. And now, I learn that survival is not enough. We must fight? The second huntress nodded. Not just fight, father. We must outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast. Humans may be few, but we are unpredictable, clever, and resilient. That is our strength. That is what the galaxy underestimates. Aaron took a deep breath, his mind racing. For years, he had survived by relying on his instincts, his wit, and his careful observation. Now, he realized that those very traits were exactly what humanity needed to rise again. The thought filled him with both fear and determination. He looked at his children, seeing in them the reflection of his own skills and traits. Each had unique abilities, honed through rigorous training and genetic design. Yet each had the spark of human creativity, ingenuity, and curiosity. They were strong, yes, but their greatest strength would come from learning to think, to question, and to adapt. Very well, Aaron said finally, standing tall. If we are to face these threats, we must prepare. I will teach you everything I know, not just how to survive, but how to think like humans, how to create, how to outsmart any enemy. And together, we will ensure humanity endures. The Huntresses' faces softened, a glimmer of hope shining in their eyes. We are ready, father, said the tallest one. We will learn from you, and together, we will face whatever comes. The night settled over the dead world, the sky painted with stars that had watched civilizations rise and fall. For the first time in decades, Aaron felt a sense of purpose that went beyond mere survival. Humanity had returned, not just through his children, but through the legacy of resilience, ingenuity, and courage that he had carried alone for so long. As the stars flickered above, Aaron led the Huntresses outside to the city ruins. You need to see where I've survived, he said. You need to understand what it means to live on the edge of extinction, to adapt when all seems lost. Only then will you truly grasp the strength of humanity. They walked together, the crunch of sand and debris beneath their feet, breaking the silence that had ruled the world for so long. Aaron pointed to collapsed buildings, to rusted machines, to empty streets. Every failure, every mistake, every success I've had here has taught me something. You must learn to observe, to experiment, to adapt. That is what humans do. We survive not just by strength, but by thought. The third huntress crouched beside a shattered vehicle, examining the mechanisms with keen eyes. You're teaching us not just to survive, but to think, to understand. This is more valuable than any weapon, she said, a note of admiration in her voice. Aaron smiled faintly. Exactly. Machines can follow orders, aliens can follow patterns, but humans create, imagine, and adapt. That is why we endure. As dawn approached, the group returned to the shelter. Aaron sat with his children, explaining the history of humanity, the mistakes of the past, and the lessons that had allowed him to survive. He spoke of courage, of cleverness, of empathy, the traits that no training could teach but that defined the heart of humans. And while the dead world outside remained quiet, inside the shelter, life and hope flourished. Aaron realized that his isolation had not been wasted. It had prepared him for this moment, to guide the next generation of humanity, to ensure that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, humans would rise, strong, clever, and unbroken. The night ended with a quiet sense of determination. Aaron and his children knew that challenges awaited them, threats beyond imagination. Yet, for the first time, they faced the future not as a lone survivor or lone warriors, but as a family, a bond forged not just by blood, but by shared purpose and human ingenuity. The dead world, once a symbol of endings, now held the promise of a new beginning, and as Aaron looked at the stars, he knew one thing for certain. Humanity would not only survive, it would rise. Days passed on the silent world, yet for Aaron and his children, the shelter buzzed with life and energy. The 3 huntresses, his children, as impossible as that truth seemed, adapted quickly, eager to learn and test themselves. For Aaron, it was a strange mix of joy and responsibility, teaching beings who were strong, clever, and already skilled, yet still young enough to shape. Each morning, he woke before the sun, checking the perimeter of the shelter. He taught them observation skills, the value of patience, and how to notice the smallest signs of movement in the dead city. Even in ruins, danger could exist. And Aaron wanted them to understand that survival required constant awareness. "You see the cracks in the wall?" he asked one morning, pointing to a crumbling building outside. "They aren't just damage. They tell a story. How the building fell, where the wind passes, how debris might shift. You must read everything, or it will surprise you." The tallest huntress knelt beside him, eyes scanning the ruins. "Everything tells a story," she said softly. "I never thought to notice this before." Aaron smiled. "That is human observation. Machines see patterns, but humans understand context, intent, and consequence. That is why we survive." Training was not just physical. It was mental, emotional, and instinctive. They practiced navigating the broken city, setting up traps to catch water or small creatures, improvising tools from scraps, and reading weather patterns to predict storms or dust winds. Each lesson reinforced not only survival, but ingenuity, the unpredictable thinking that made humans resilient. At midday, Aaron would teach them inside the shelter. He shared lessons from old books, stories of human history, and lessons of philosophy, science, and strategy. He explained how humans had survived famine, disease, war, and cosmic disasters. His children listened intently, absorbing knowledge, asking questions, and debating possibilities. "I don't understand," said the second huntress one day. "If we are the last of humanity, why do we study the past? Why not focus on fighting, on surviving?" Aaron leaned back in his chair. "Because surviving is not enough. Machines and aliens can survive, follow rules, and execute commands. But humans create. Humans adapt. To survive tomorrow, you must understand yesterday. You must learn why humans succeeded and failed. That knowledge is power." Afternoons were reserved for physical training. The huntresses were already skilled, but Aaron pushed them further. They ran through the ruins, leaping over debris, climbing crumbling walls, and carrying supplies across difficult terrain. He taught them how to use their environment to their advantage, to think creatively in combat, and to make clever choices under pressure. "You see that ridge?" Aaron said, pointing to a pile of debris. "Most would avoid it, seeing danger. But humans? We look for opportunity. You can use that ridge for cover, for observation, for an advantage no one expects." The third huntress grinned. "I like thinking like that. It makes every obstacle a chance, not a problem." Evenings were spent around a small fire, sharing stories, discussing strategy, and reflecting on the lessons of the day. Slowly, the bond between Aaron and his children deepened. They began to share small jokes, personal quirks, and memories of training sessions. Despite their extraordinary abilities, they were still human, curious, playful, and eager to connect. "You know," the tallest huntress said one evening, staring at the stars, "I always trained to fight, to survive, to conquer. But this is new. Learning from you, it feels different. It feels like being alive." Aaron nodded, warmth in his chest. "Being alive is more than fighting. It is thinking, feeling, creating, and connecting. You can fight and win battles, but if you forget what makes you human, you lose more than the war you lose yourself. Their bond was tested one morning when an alarm he had rigged on the perimeter sounded. Iran rushed outside, finding subtle signs of movement in the distance. A small probe, possibly sent to scout his location. Not many would notice this, Iran said, crouching near the device. But humans notice the small things. The probe is not dangerous alone, but it tells a story. Someone is coming, or watching. We must prepare. The Huntresses studied the probe, analyzing its construction and purpose. It's like a warning, said the second Huntress. Someone wants to see if we are ready. Iran nodded. Exactly. And humans always respond, not just with strength, but with creativity. That is what we do best. He instructed them to set traps, camouflage the shelter, and develop a plan to observe without being detected. By the end of the day, the dead world around them seemed alive with possibility, as if every ruin, every shadow, was now a tool to be used. Days turned into weeks, and their training became a rhythm, a shared life. The Huntresses were not just students. They were extensions of Iran's knowledge, quick to adapt, and capable of teaching each other. Yet, amid the lessons and laughter, Iran never let them forget the seriousness of their situation. One night, the tallest Huntress spoke quietly. Father, we are strong, but the universe is vast. Out there are forces that do not value human life. Are we truly ready? One Mager, are we truly ready? Iran studied the stars, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. We are never fully ready. But humans are defined not by their readiness, but by their response. We face danger with intelligence, courage, and creativity. That is our edge. And you are my children. Together, we will rise to meet any challenge. Weeks later, they began practicing simulated battles. Using the terrain of the dead city, Iran created scenarios where his children had to think quickly, adapt, and outmaneuver unseen enemies. Each simulation was designed to push their limits physically, mentally, and emotionally. They learned to anticipate, to improvise, to think beyond instinct. You must imagine the enemy, Iran said during one exercise. Think about what they expect, and then do something different. Humans survive because we are unpredictable. We do not follow patterns they do. That is why we win. The Huntresses nodded, testing different strategies, learning from failures, celebrating clever solutions, and adapting in real time. Iran watched with pride, seeing his teachings take shape in their movements, their decisions, and their problem-solving. It was during one of these exercises that the third Huntress paused, staring at the horizon. Father, I see something, she said. Iran squinted, noticing faint signals in the distance, a movement unlike anything natural. He walked closer, analyzing the signs. You are right. This is not just a simulation. Something is approaching. We may have been discovered sooner than I expected. The three Huntresses readied themselves, moving with practiced precision. Yet, Iran stayed calm, knowing that fear would only cloud judgment. Remember your training, he said quietly. Observe, adapt, and respond. Humans survive by thinking, not just by fighting. As the figures drew closer, the dead world seemed to hold its breath. The Huntresses moved silently, scouting and observing, their bond with Iran stronger than ever. They worked as a unit, father and children, teacher and students, humans bound by blood, knowledge, and purpose. When the figures finally came into view, Iran saw them clearly: small scouting drones, sent by an unknown force, designed to test, probe, and perhaps intimidate. Yet, instead of panic, he felt a surge of determination. Humans had faced impossible odds before, and now, on a dead world, they would rise again. Iran and his children devised a clever plan. Using traps, misdirection, and clever observation, they disabled the drones without being seen. Each movement was precise, each decision deliberate. By the time the drones retreated, the Huntresses had learned a critical lesson. Humans were strongest not when they attacked blindly, but when they used intelligence, creativity, and unity. That night, they gathered around the fire, their faces glowing in the flickering light. Iran looked at them, feeling an overwhelming sense of pride and hope. "Today, you learned more than just fighting," he said softly. "You learned to think, to adapt, to rise above what seems impossible. That is the essence of humanity. And that is why we survive." The tallest huntress smiled, a glimmer of warmth in her eyes. "Father, you have taught us more than we could have imagined. Not just survival, but humanity itself. We are ready for whatever comes next." Iran nodded, gazing at the stars above. The dead world was no longer silent, no longer lifeless. It held the promise of life, resilience, and human ingenuity. And though challenges lay ahead, he knew that together they could face anything. For the first time in decades, Iran felt truly alive, not just a survivor, but a father guiding the next generation of humanity. And in that quiet, broken world, a spark of hope burned brighter than ever. The wind howled across the barren plains of Iran's world, carrying dust and the faint metallic scent of old ruins. Yet inside his shelter, life buzzed with energy and preparation. Iran and his children, the three Huntresses, had trained relentlessly for weeks, learning not only to survive but to think, adapt, and act together. Now, the moment they had been preparing for had arrived. Small lights flickered in the sky far above, moving with precision and purpose. Scouts, drones, perhaps the first wave of a much larger threat. Their approach was deliberate, testing the defenses of a planet the enemy assumed was abandoned. Iran stood with his children atop the ridge outside their shelter, his eyes scanning the horizon. The Huntresses moved silently beside him, each instinctively aware of her surroundings. The tallest one, his eldest by mere minutes in creation but seasoned in skill, spoke quietly. "They are scouts. They test before an attack, but they are predictable. We can use that." Iran nodded, pride and determination swelling in his chest. "Exactly. Humans survive because we are unpredictable. Machines and aliens expect patterns. We create them. We break them. That is our strength." Using the terrain to their advantage, Iran and the Huntresses positioned traps, camouflage, and observation points across the ruined city. Every building, every collapsed wall, every shadow became part of their strategy. The world, once lifeless, now served as a battlefield for human ingenuity. The scouts descended, small but fast-moving machines, designed to detect life and energy. They expected easy targets, empty streets, and a lone survivor. Instead, they found themselves met with calculated obstacles, misdirections, and clever decoys. The second huntress crouched behind a crumbling wall, manipulating a device Iran had crafted. "Watch this," she whispered. She activated a small magnetic pulse, temporarily disabling the nearest drone and sending it crashing into debris. The other scouts adjusted, but Iran had anticipated it. "Now," Iran said calmly, "use the ridge. Lead them into the traps. Remember, adapt, observe, and create opportunity. Humans survive by thinking, not by force alone." The Huntresses moved as one. Each decision, each movement, was deliberate, blending instinct and strategy. They led the scouts into narrow alleys, among piles of debris, and into hidden pits lined with energy dampeners. One by one, the drones fell, their circuits disrupted not by weapons, but by clever traps and human creativity. The final scout, larger than the others, hovered above the central plaza, scanning for life. Aaron stepped forward, his children flanking him. He raised his hand, signaling a coordinated move. Using a combination of reflective surfaces, EMP pulses, and misdirection, they forced the drone into a metal cage rigged with energy disruptors. A sudden burst of power disabled the drone completely. For a moment, the dead city fell silent. Then, the Huntresses exhaled, sharing a quiet laugh of relief and triumph. Aaron's heart swelled with pride. These were his children, not just skilled warriors, but humans in the truest sense. Clever, adaptive, and resilient. But there was no time to celebrate. Aaron knew the scouts were only a precursor. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the main force was gathering. A fleet, perhaps larger than humanity had ever faced, moved with intent toward this seemingly dead world. And yet, Aaron felt no fear. They expect fear, he said quietly to his children. They expect panic, submission, surrender. But we are humans. We adapt. We survive. And we fight in ways they cannot predict. The Huntresses nodded. They understood that this battle was not just for survival, but for the demonstration of human spirit. It was a chance to show that even on a dead world, humanity could rise, cleverer and stronger than any foe. Night fell, and the stars sparkled cold and distant above. Aaron's group moved swiftly, setting up signals, traps, and observation posts. They were ghosts in the ruins, striking without warning, using shadows and reflections to confuse and mislead. Every corner of the city was a tool, every ruin a weapon, every idea a chance to outsmart the enemy. When the first wave of the main fleet arrived, the dead world seemed alive with movement and purpose. Energy pulses, misdirected signals, and clever decoys led the enemy into traps they could not anticipate. Machines crashed, circuits fried, and alien drones were led astray into sand-filled pits or magnetic fields, designed to neutralize them. The Huntresses moved with grace and precision, their training evident in every action. The second Huntress hacked into the enemy drones remotely, sending false signals to redirect their formations. The third Huntress used agility and speed to place traps in places the enemy would never expect. And Aaron, with decades of survival experience, guided them, combining human intuition with strategy that machines could not calculate. Hours passed, and slowly, the fleet faltered. Their calculations had assumed predictable humans. They did not account for adaptability, ingenuity, and courage. Every drone defeated, every machine neutralized, was a testament to the strength of human creativity. Finally, the remaining forces retreated, unable to cope with the combination of strategy, traps, and unpredictability. Aaron and his children stood together, the ruined city quiet once more. Yet this silence was different. It was filled with accomplishment, hope, and the knowledge that they had survived against overwhelming odds. Aaron looked at his children, pride shining in his eyes. You have learned to think, to adapt, to create. That is what makes humans different. That is why we survive when others fail. The tallest Huntress smiled, her eyes reflecting both fatigue and triumph. Father, you taught us more than survival. You taught us what it means to be human. And together, we are stronger than anything that comes our way. The dead world, once a symbol of loneliness and despair, now held life and hope. Aaron and his children began the slow process of rebuilding, turning the ruins into a safe haven and training ground for the next generation of humans. The world was still barren, but within its walls, the spirit of humanity burned brightly. In the days that followed, Aaron continued teaching, not just survival skills, but philosophy, creativity, and the unpredictable thinking that made humans unique. His children thrived, learning faster than he could have imagined, combining their inherited skills with the wisdom he passed down. They explored the planet, discovering hidden resources, ancient technology, and ways to reclaim life in small pockets. Each success reinforced the lesson Aaron had been trying to teach. Humanity could rise from nothing, adapt to any challenge, and create solutions that no enemy could predict. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of red and orange, Aaron stood with his children on a ridge, overlooking the city. The wind carried the faint scent of dust and metal, but it also carried something new hope. "You see this world?" Aaron said quietly. "It is not dead. Not as long as humans are here. We endure. We adapt. We create. And one day, this world will thrive again, not just as a reminder of the past, but as a promise for the future." The Huntresses nodded, understanding the truth in his words. They had witnessed the threat, learned from it, and overcome it. They were more than warriors, they were humans, clever, resourceful, and united. The tallest huntress placed a hand on Aaron's shoulder. "Father, you have given us more than life. You have given us purpose. And together, we will ensure humanity rises, no matter what the galaxy throws at us." Aaron smiled, feeling a warmth that had long been absent. The dead world no longer felt empty. It held life, potential, and the unbreakable spirit of humans. They were more than survivors, they were a family, a symbol, and a promise that humanity could endure anything. As night fell and stars sparkled above, Aaron looked at the horizon, imagining the challenges ahead. He knew there would be more threats, more battles, and more tests of human ingenuity. But he also knew one thing with absolute certainty. Humanity would not just survive, humanity would rise. And on a world that had once seemed dead, the spark of life burned brighter than ever.